time to talk about how do you care for a garden. Now that may seem like a kind of funny question, but let's talk about it for a minute. So the basics for keeping your garden alive is it doesn't need to compete with weeds. You need to make sure you're keeping on top of any weeds that come up. Now, we like to go through at least weekly and pick all the weeds in the beds. That way we never lose control of your beds. It's kind of a joke amongst gardeners. If you still have control of your yard by August or July, then you need to think about putting more beds in. And it's strangely accurate. Your plants just cannot succeed if they're trying to compete for water and nutrients and even sunlight. So it's really important to keep your weeds down. The next thing you're going to need to think about is watering. You need to be watering at least once daily if you're living somewhere that's really hot in the summer. Here in the South, we're in Tennessee, and we have very long, very hot, very muggy summers. So we end up watering at least once a day. On the hottest parts of the year, we can often be found out here twice a day watering, especially if we've just put in new seedlings. Now, it's more important to get your young stuff that isn't established watered daily at least than your older stuff. Those can last a couple days. If you can't get out there and water every single day, go for the ones that are young and haven't established their roots, because they're going to need the most water. Now, another thing you can think about, if you haven't had time to really fertilize your soil, we like to fertilize ours 2 months before we start planting. That way it's got time to really soak in and enrich your soil. But if you don't have time to do that and your plants look like they're struggling, you can always fertilize your plants by a side dressing of compost, and that just means putting a pile of compost next to your plant and watering through that. That way your plant is fertilized over and over and over while you're watering. Another thing you can do is topically apply something like fish emulsion or compost tea in a sprayer. That's called a foliar spray, and it's going to actually fertilize your plants through the leaves. Either one of these will work. We use them all interchangeably when necessary, and that is pretty much how you're going to take care of your garden. There are a couple other things you may run into. You may need to stake things like tomatoes. If you're growing determinate tomatoes, it's not going to be as big of a deal. You can use a stake or a tomato cage usually. But if you're growing indeterminate like we are, you're going to need something really hefty to hold up those tomatoes. The same thing with zucchini, cucumbers, or beans. They're going to need something to climb, and you may need to actually help them up and tie them up a little bit. We use twist ties, we use twine, just whatever you have. Tie it to the plant loosely to your trellis and help it get there. You can also stake things that are a little flimsy so that they stay upright and they're keeping their leaves off the ground. That is the basics for caring for a garden. It's not that complicated.